Welcome to my session, Implementing the PubSub API with Mulesoft Anypoint Code Builder. I'm Shepard. A little bit about me. I'm a Managing Director of Architecture and Delivery for Salesforce partner, SRA. I'm a Salesforce Certified Technical Architect, also B2B and B2C Solution Architect, 35 certifications, Golden Hoodie, Mulesoft and Ladies Be Architect Ambassador, as well as a well-architected ambassador for Salesforce. I'm a marketing champion, founder of Scale Up Arcs nonprofit, and architect Ohana Slack. I'm a user group leader and also an organizer for a couple different events, the Architect Dreamin and Northeast Dreamin. So I'm going to start off giving you a little bit of a background on event-driven architecture. So as a well-architected ambassador, I like to try to teach a little bit about what's in the well-architected documentation. If you're not familiar with it, you can go to architect.salesforce.com. You can find the well-architected framework there. It was inspired by the AWS well-architected framework. And the reason why I'm going over this is because the PubSub API is meant for event-driven integration. So it supports that. So event-driven architectures support the efficient production and consumption of events, which represent state changes. So when you have a near real-time integration, event-driven architectures are preferred. And this is all right from Salesforce Well Architected. It helps you build more flexible connections between systems. It enables a system to provide near real-time updates to one or more other systems. And it supports processes that take place across multiple systems. Here is the publish subscribe pattern. This is one of the most common patterns you're going to see in event-driven architecture. So you can see we have multiple systems over here on the left. We've got the event bus. This is something like Mulesoft, your middleware, and then we've got other systems on the right. So as you can see that there's many different events being published and also subscribed to. And the same system can both publish an event and subscribe to an event. And these events are published to and subscribed to on the event bus. So a few things about the publish subscribe pattern is there's no direct connection between publishers and subscribers. It's that middle layer, that ESB, is going to be the connection between the different systems. So they don't go point to point. So we're avoiding a point-to-point integration by using this pattern with that middle ESB. Systems may publish or subscribe to multiple types of events. And then the same system can be both a publisher and a subscriber. So we have some use cases. When do you want to use event-driven architectures? This is when you have near real-time notifications, parallel processing, high volume reads, high volume writes, sending the same data to different systems, frequently introducing new systems or devices into an IT landscape. Also when you might have IoT devices that need to connect and send notifications and subscribe to events. And then mobile devices and systems that may be offline when changes occur. And also I want to point out that event-driven architecture is really an asynchronous integration pattern. So it's not going to be getting a direct response when sending out a request immediately. So Salesforce to other systems, when you're connecting Salesforce to different systems in the landscape, there are some considerations you want to take. So you want to use an ESB, as I mentioned, something such as Mulesoft. There's also things like Dell Boomi, Informatica. You really want to use this where possible because it's going to do your heavy lifting, and it can be the subscriber to the events and then push those events to whatever source systems or target systems from that source system that want to subscribe to the event. So it does all that logic and transformation and pushing things around and queuing and retries and all kinds of things that you just don't want to do in Salesforce. And the PubSub API is really what you want to use for this publish subscribe pattern. So previously we just had the streaming API, and the PubSub API is the newer version of that. So, and the whole reason why I decided to do this presentation is I was thinking, okay, so I know about platform events, I know about the streaming API. How do I actually use the PubSub API? It just wasn't making sense to me. So I decided to just spin up a dev org with Mulesoft, and I started playing around with it to figure out how to do this. And it was a lot more simple than I thought, but that I wanted to walk through how to actually do that. So that's what this presentation is about. So also, high volume platform events and change data capture are preferred for publishing record and field changes. So you can still use platform events with the PubSub API. That's the great news. You don't have to move away from any of your existing platform events that you've built. And also change data capture, another great way to integrate with more out of the box capabilities. So a little bit about the PubSub API and why it is the preferred method over the streaming API. So it's a single interface for publishing and subscribing to platform and change data capture events. It's based on gRPC API and HTTP2, so there's a lot of benefits there. It efficiently publishes and delivers binary event messages in the Apache Avro format. It also allows users to publish and subscribe to events, request schema, and request topic information all within one API. And you can also author in a familiar programming language. So if you're not using Mulesoft and you're not using a pre-built connector, you can use 11 different languages to subscribe to the PubSub API, whereas before with the streaming API it was Comet D and the Bayou protocol. Now you've got a lot more options. So Python, Java, Node, C++, a lot of options here if you want to build your own connector to subscribe. Some benefits. So eradicates the need for building out a custom Comet D streaming API client. I don't know if you've ever worked with that, but it can be kind of tricky. I was working with the streaming API way back when it was just push topics and creating those Comet D streaming API clients. It's a lot of work. You also can control the flow of events with a pull subscription. You can also specify how many events to receive in a subscribe call based on event processing speed in the client. And it's a real-time, highly performant data streaming API. So because PubSub API is based on gRPC and HTTP2, it benefits from the HTTP2 compression. So it's 7 times more performant than REST, which is really surprising because REST is supposed to be, the high-performing API. This is way more performant. And it also has bidirectional streaming and increased security. So this is really why you want to try to use PubSub API going forward. So now we'll get into how can we use this with Mulesoft. So you want to use the Salesforce PubSub API connector in the Mulesoft Anypoint Exchange marketplace. So the good news is Mulesoft has done all that heavy lifting of writing the code to help you connect to this API. So it gives developers the benefits of PubSub API without having to build that custom client. It's a new connector that is purpose-built for event-driven integration. It works alongside the current Salesforce connector. So if you are doing stuff from Mulesoft and you're familiar with the current Salesforce connector, you can use both. It subscribes to Salesforce platform events or change data capture. It can publish Salesforce platform events. So if you want to write back to Salesforce using platform events, you can do that. You also can extend this with the connector ecosystem, so you can combine different connectors to complete the entire job that you want to get done. So there's more than 200 Mule connectors to a number of ecosystems like Azure and SAP. So maybe you're subscribing to the platform events with the PubSub API connector, and then you need to send that data off to other systems like Azure, SAP. Then you can use those connectors within your whole orchestration to get this whole job done. And then you can also transform and filter payloads using data weave transforms, and you can use this to seamlessly move data between systems using different data structures and formats. So let's take a look. We're going to look at how we can subscribe to a Salesforce platform event using the new Mulesoft Anypoint Code Builder. And this is an exciting new product from Mulesoft that any Salesforce developer should be excited about because it's just like being in VS Code. And you can download VS Code. You can get the, they actually just came out with the desktop version, so it's a plugin for VS Code. I'm going to show you the web version. It's easy to go in and create a free Mulesoft account and then play around with the web IDE. So the first thing you want to do is you want to define your Salesforce platform event. So if you've done this before, you know you go into setup, platform events, you just say new platform event. And I have an example of one here where I'm sending a message out using a platform event to create an ERP invoice when an order is completed. So next, you're going to go, if you go to the Mulesoft free account, when you log in, you'll see Code Builder Web IDE and a button to launch that web IDE. You're going to click that. And then you'll see some options on the left. And this is where it can get a little confusing navigating in the Anypoint Code Builder web version. You want to go to develop an integration. I think this is how it looks on the desktop version as well. I've just been playing around with that recently. So you click on the little Mulesoft logo, go to develop an integration, and then it will bring you to naming your project. So this will probably start to look a little bit familiar with VS Code users. Create the project. And then it's going to create an XML file. So this is, like, learning this, it was a little bit confusing for me. You have to actually click on that XML file, and then it's going to ask you, what do you want to build? And this is really cool. This is also probably familiar for Salesforce people. You want to build a flow or a subflow. So you can actually structure your integrations the same way you structure your flows in Salesforce. And then I chose flow, and then you'll see this is your flow canvas. It's very similar to building flows in Salesforce. You then add your component by clicking on the box there, the plus sign, and this is where you're going to start adding in your PubSub API connector. So to add the connector from the Exchange, you want to do Command-Shift-P, just like you would do in VS Code. So you want to look for Mulesoft, and then import asset from Exchange. So you'll click that. And then you're going to look for Salesforce. So you can start typing, you choose connector, and then you start looking for the PubSub API connector. So you can see here, this is the PubSub API connector. You can also see the regular Salesforce connector. So we choose the PubSub API connector here. And then you see it's added to the flow layout. So a whole bunch of XML then gets generated, which you then see on the right. So the first thing you need to do is you actually need to create the connection to your Salesforce instance. And there's a really cool feature here where you can actually test the connection. So you put in your PubSub config, and then you have to give it a name, and then this is really bad practice, I use the basic connection. You probably want to use something more like OAuth with a connected app, but I just was doing this to make it really easy, put in my username and password, but I don't recommend that. And then you test it, and it will tell you if that connection works or not. So it's pretty cool. So I really love this new way of doing things, because I know that the Anypoint platform has never really been too intuitive, so this is just going to make it so much easier for Salesforce developers to start building integrations. So this is how I created the config. So I just started typing in Salesforce, and it's before that flow tag. You want to do it outside that flow tag that it creates, which is down here a little bit hidden. And you see Salesforce PubSub config comes up. It's IntelliSense, so you'll just choose that, click on it, and then you start filling it out. That's where I decided to give it a name. And then within those brackets, you start typing Salesforce again, and then you see all the different options. So I chose the basic connection because I'm lazy, but you can see there's the config with OAuth, there's a JOT connection, OAuth user password, also not really recommended, and then you also have SAML. So all the different ways that you can connect to your Salesforce org. And then the other thing that you have to do is you have to add a channel listener. This is what you're going to use to actually subscribe to the event that Salesforce publishes. So this is actually going to go inside your flow tag. So you'll do the config, and then down below is this flow tag that gets created. You start typing in Salesforce within there, and then you choose the Salesforce PubSub, and then subscribe channel listener. So this generates some more XML for you, and then you want to fill out some of these things here. So the channel name is going to be the event channel in Salesforce. So that's usually /event / the name of that platform event that you created. And then the config reference, that's the config that we just went through creating just before the flow tag. So I gave it the name of SFDC pub sub test. So then you reference that configuration here. That's how it connects to the Salesforce org. And then the rest is just, it's the default. And so then within here, you also can specify your replay option. So it adds that for you. And what I did is I added a tag that's just the Salesforce pub sub earliest. So that's also in IntelliSense. You just start typing it and it gives you the different options. So another thing for this to actually work is you've got to add an HTTP listener in your XML or in your basically in your flow, but it comes out as XML. So this is just so I could get it to work, and it's just the name is just inbound request. It's very basic. There's really not a host name. It's kind of like a dummy thing, and port 8081. So very basic there. And then to actually see this working, instead of connecting to another system, I just added a logger element to my flow. Very easy, basic, so that way you can see the output and it shows your integration working and subscribing to the platform event. The trick here is in the message, I have this is the event info, and then it's the £, and then bracket, payload, and bracket. That's what's going to get your output to actually show in the logger window. And then once you get this working, then you can add a connector to connect to another system. You can start transforming the data and parsing it out and doing all kinds of cool stuff with it. So to test it out, you want to go to run, start debugging. This also should be very familiar for Salesforce developers. And then you want to go to your Salesforce org and you want to trigger that platform event to get published. And when it's published, it will then show up here in your logger. So I highlighted where the platform event information came out through that payload. And you can see it says event. It gives an event ID. And then you can see it says this is the well, it should say this is the event. Event info. Yeah, I was on the wrong line. And so then it says replay ID, and it gives you all the event information. So I integrated on orders when orders were, I think it was finalized. And so it's giving me the order number, the order ID. It's showing me what is actually in that platform event that I defined. And those are the fields that I added. So you can see the information coming through. So it's just a really great way to start playing around and get familiar with integration and using these event driven integrations, and also getting used to using the pub sub API. So, you know, nothing too difficult here, but just going through those steps and understanding how to set this all up in Anypoint Code Builder. I struggled with that a bit, so that's why I'm presenting here to you to make it a little bit easier for you to get started. And so now you're integrating with the Salesforce pub sub API. Woohoo! And one last thing, just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to Gemma Blizzard, someone who's very important to me, very close friend. She was a close friend, dear friend, inspiration for me on my architect journey. You know, we just lost her recently, so just wanted to take a moment to recognize her and the contributions she's made to this community. This event was a special one for her. She loved French Touch Dreamin. She was here last year. She also took part in our very first architect Dreamin that was inspired by her, and it was here because of her, so that she could easily get here because she wasn't able to travel too far in her last year or so of her sickness. There's a QR code there for her book. Highly recommend getting that and reading it. And then also a QR code to Ladies Be Architects, because that is the thing that she created and that we're all kind of pushing forward in her memory now. As I'm a Ladies Be Architects ambassador. We get some other ones here. And so just wanted to take a moment to recognize her and her impact on the architect community and the Salesforce community in general. So thank you. Oh, I do have some resources. So I actually go through this live. I did a code live with Akshata Sawant. She's a Mulesoft developer advocate for Salesforce. So I went through all the steps live in this video. There's also Salesforce Well Architected on the event-driven architecture, information on the Salesforce PubSub API, more from Mulesoft on the PubSub connector, Anypoint Code Builder. Also, I have the URL here to sign up for a free account with Mulesoft so you can try this out for yourself. And then questions about Anypoint Code Builder. So this was in beta and now it's GA, so it's out there. Also, I'm a Mulesoft ambassador, so if you are interested in the Mulesoft track, you need to apply to be a mentor first. So that's a QR code there for that. There's also a QR code for Mulesoft training and certification. Lots of stuff out there for that. And then also some QR codes for continued learning with Mulesoft. So as an architect, love integration, love Mulesoft. It's a great product. So I always encourage people to get involved and start learning about it. And thank you for coming. Question? Yeah, would you talk a little bit more about streaming versus PubSub? The streaming API, it's really just the technology behind it, those things that I outlined. So streaming API, you need to use you had to create a CometD client, or Mulesoft had the connector that was a CometD client. So if you want me to get more in-depth than that, I'm not really sure I can. Just I would go with PubSub API since it's going to give you, I believe, higher limits, and because it's really kind of not on platform for what I understand, whereas streaming API is. PubSub's kind of off platform, so you're going to get higher limits, and because that's something you always got to think about when using streaming API is all those limits. So I'm pretty sure PubSub gives you more, but you'd have to look at the documentation. But I just always recommend using it. It's just it's the newest way of building event-driven integrations. So, and that's what they're going to probably focus on. Where streaming API is probably going to get deprecated at some point, and everything's just going to be, you know how it works. Yeah. Oh, okay. But they do pretty much the same thing. So, anything else? Yeah. I believe, yeah. You didn't see any of that, but there's probably more things you can play around with, like all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I definitely more digging that you can do and play around with all that stuff once you get in there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can do all that in MuleSoft. Yep. I kept it very high level and basic. Just how to get started. Anything else? No? Well, thank you for coming.